Hello and welcome to the Alpha Software Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software. And today I am going to do some front-end stuff. Last week we were doing back-end stuff. We were taking a look at hosting, basically hosting Alpha anywhere yourself on your own home or network computer. Today we're going quite the opposite. We're taking a look at some design tricks that you can do with animation. But before we begin, I just want to do a quick sound check, make sure that you can hear me. Also make sure that you see my mouse moving on the screen. All is good, fantastic. So today we are going to be talking specifically, boom, about animations. And we're going to be spending a bit of time talking about a file type called Lottie files. So Lottie files, so first of all, I have to say that I didn't come up with this topic by myself. For the last many weeks, I've been asked to do a presentation on this, and my first reaction was probably what your first reaction would be, which is what is a Lottie file? So as it turns out, it was our graphics person who knew. Lottie files are a type of animation file, and they remind me very much of like Macromedia or Adobe Flash, but they've got some big benefits behind them that Adobe Flash didn't have. So basically, they let you put in, basically, they're an alternative, as you can see here on the Wikipedia page, to animated GIFs or APINGs. And they are vector-based instead of raster-based. So the benefit to that, of course, is that you can size them any size you like without anything being distorted. And it also means they take up considerably less space, especially as you start talking about larger file sizes. The thing about the Lottie file format is that it is actually not recognized really by any browsers out there. So fortunately, though, there is a piece of JavaScript player that handles that. It's basically the player for Lottie files. And I'll talk about how you get that and how you can incorporate that into your Alpha Anywhere applications. But probably the best place to begin is with Lottie files themselves. And if you go to a website called lottiefiles.com, you will find a collection here. This is very much like Getty Images or something like that, or Flat Icon, and they have got a whole collection, but they are devoted just to Lottie files. And you'll see that actually quite a few people use them. This is a very popular file format used by a lot of folks. As I was browsing around, I saw this checkmark element here, and I thought, well, that'd be pretty cool to put that into an application. Maybe, if something is successful, have that pop up and have the checkmark animate and let you know that it worked. So I thought, well, that's kind of cool. Let's just go ahead and do that. So I went over to, and I selected the element, and I was able to basically download it and use it in an application. So I'm still running that web server that we set up last week. And if you guys want to give this a go, you can actually point your phone either to this QR code, or you could go to goofcanoe.com/live-preview/animate.a5w. Now, I don't know how well it's going to handle all of you folks hitting it all at the same time, but let's give it a go. Let me know if it loads for you. If you're watching this after the fact, I have no guarantee that this will be up. This is just a temporary web server that we're doing for today. But if it does load, I do actually have the screenshots of everything you're going to see. You'll see that we built a little web application. It consists of 3 panel cards. The first panel card is a submit button. And when you click that submit button, it takes you to this screen, and then this icon here animates to let you know that it was done. Excellent. Oh, someone says that it runs, and it runs. Cool. Now you can also swipe with your finger to get to that third panel card, and you'll see this little owl icon that's working there. And that has little player controls and stuff. One thing that's interesting about Lottie files, which was kind of like Flash, is that they can be interactive. I'm not going to get into that. That's kind of really detailed. You want to, I'm sure there's all kinds of classes on Lottie files, but just for example, this player lets you do things, but Lottie files in general, you can click on them, you can interact with them. Today, we're going to be just looking at them in terms of animation and seeing how we can put one into our applications. So So I went over to select that file. It showed up in the player. And, oh, excuse me a second. Okay, thanks. I went into the player and I said, okay, great, I'm going to download this file. And I saw that I had a couple of options. One was the Lottie file format, which you can see is pretty small, especially when it's compressed. It was like about 2 kilobytes compared to like the GIF version, which it doesn't actually show you here, but I happen to know was about 22 kilobytes. And that was for a GIF that was 150 pixels by 150 pixels. So if you went bigger, of course, that would be a bigger GIF file. Not so with the Lottie file because it's vector-based. So I can see a benefit right here in terms of the size of the file is pretty cool. And the fact that Lottie files would allow interactivity, those seem like two good reasons to have Lottie files. But as you'll see, they're a little bit more involved to put in than simply inserting a GIF. But I'll show you how to do it. It's not too bad. Okay, so let's go take a look. And right on the Lottie Files website, there are in fact instructions on how to do this. And basically all you do is there are 2 parts. There are, and I'm going to skip ahead to the second part because it might make more sense. There's this part, this is the player. So for example, the owl that you saw on the screen, if I had placed the player there, that's where the owl would appear, and I can put that anywhere. But take a look at this tag, Lottie-player. I mean, no browser understands what that tag means, unless, of course, there was some JavaScript that was run ahead of time how to handle it. So let's go back to step 1, where we should start. And up here at the head section of your HTML page, you're going to want to paste in this script tag. And I've done that here in my application. So I have an A5W page called animate.a5w. And I went into the source. Often I'm using the WYSIWYG view because all I'm doing is dropping in my web component. But I went into source and I went into the head section and I pasted in that snippet of code, and that's all I needed to do. Now, as a quick reminder, or for those people who weren't used to building applications in Alpha Anywhere, Alpha Anywhere, typically you build it by building what's called a web component. Often it's a UX component is the type we use. There's another component called a grid, which is also popular. But that component by itself needs to be placed into a web page. And that web page is what's called, either in a mobile app or on the web, to run the component. So this is basically a container, this page. And at the top of the container, that's where we pasted in that script tag. All right, so then the second part is to insert the player itself. And this is the format for doing that. It's this, plus you need to know the URL of the Lottie file. So that might be local to your server, or it might be the same page that this is being served from. So it might just be the Lottie file name there, or it might point to a different server where you're serving your Lottie files from. So if you were doing them, say, from an S3 bucket or something, that might make sense. So if you want to insert just some random HTML into a web component, one great way to do that is just to use a text element, which you'll find here under Other Controls, Static Text. And here I am in my UX, and we're taking a look here at panel card 3. That was the third one, which had the owl on it. And in the HTML text, all I did was I pasted literally the HTML I wanted. That's all I had to do. And that inserted it. And then when we went and ran the page, the owl appeared. Now, interestingly, if I had run this in working preview or in live preview, this would not, I don't think live preview would have worked, but working preview, yeah, no, I don't think either would work. And the reason that neither of them would work is because this doesn't know anything about that code that we had pasted into the container, into that parent HTML page. So you're really not going to be able to live preview or working preview if you've pasted that source into the back here into this page. So that is sort of a downside. That might be something that can be overcome. When I put this presentation together, I probably should have looked to see if there was another way to do that. But typically, this is where you're supposed to insert the code. So that's that. The other method, though, of inserting animations is actually the one I'm probably going to recommend because it's much easier for a bunch of reasons. And that is, of course, pasting in an animated GIF. One other thing I'd like to point out, and the reason why an animated GIF is useful, is if you take a look at that piece of code that we pointed in, it points to an active website at unpackage.com. And if you see this, so when that page loads, it's going to have to hit another web server to load this package, which means that that's another dependency. It also means that this method would not work if you wanted to build it for an offline application. So instead, you'd want to get hold of this library yourself and have it run. And that's a little bit beyond what I want to get into today, but that can be done in Alpha Anywhere. So it's not impossible to make this work, and probably even work in working preview, but it's more work. And if all you're saving is just a couple of K, if you don't have a lot of animations that you're putting in, I honestly don't think that this is probably worth the effort compared to doing it as an animated GIF. But of course, that's for you to decide. So here we are back at the website at lottiefiles.com, and I'm here to download a GIF file. And so I just selected download and I went to GIF and I thought, okay, well, this is pretty easy. I'll just download it. But lo and behold, and I'm not sure why this is the case, but the GIF files and even the MP4s that it generated didn't seem to work for me. So I'm just giving you this a heads up warning. It was an easy workaround. What I discovered was, was that at the bottom here, there's another button called Save to Workspace. And it says, save this animation in your workspace to download it in more formats and for custom specifications. So when I clicked that and then returned back to the home of my website and clicked on it again, I got a slightly different download box. And this one actually works for me. So the key is, this is the little trick, when you want something at Lottie Files, download it. So there it was. I chose the GIF format. And I was very pleased to see that it had this helper tool that would let me change the resolution of the GIF, although the 150 by 150 was fine, but I didn't really want it to loop. Like, in other words, once I wanted to stop, because having it loop over and over again was going to drive me bonkers and would be a big distraction. I could choose background color, I could choose transparency, that's cool. So I started to use some of the options and click the convert GIF button, and boy, are they clever. It turns out if you want to do anything here on this box, you're going to have to pay for an account. If you leave the parameters alone, though, in other words, if you go with the default, which is 150 pixels by 150 pixels, and it's looping, you can in fact download it for free. And there it was. It showed up right there on my hard drive, and it was great. All right. So once I have my animation, and I rename it to a sensible GIF name, to add it into my project is really simple. I just, from the Web Projects control panel, right-click anywhere on the white space and choose Add File. Of course, make sure you turn off the filters so you can actually see the file that you're adding. And then this is very important because you should be using the web security framework, is that once you've added this file, make sure you've either set it to always allowed or at least set it to requires login, so that you can see it. If it's always denied, it's not going to do anyone any good. So just a quick reminder on that. After that's done, it's just basically an image that you can insert like any other into your UX component, and which I've done here. You can see I took a screenshot mid-animation as it was rendering for me. All right, so a couple of things that I want to go over. This one is really quick, and that is you might want to also take a look at Flat Icon. I know I've talked about them before. You can get GIF material from them or free GIFs if you like. I've also purchased icons from them before. I just happen to think they're pretty cool. So just a quick plug for Flat Icon. The last thing I wanted to cover, though, had to do with that looping problem. So having this checkmark animate over and over and over again, of course, isn't what we want. And I was unable from Lottie files to get anything except the loop that GIF and edit it and tell it not to loop. So there are a bunch of tools for doing that, but one that's I think is really quite awesome is one called GIMP. And I bet you most people have heard of GIMP because it's been around for 25 years. Free open source product, runs on everything. So with GIMP, if you're not familiar with it, I'm going to show you what you need to do. It's really easy. You just go over to gimp.org, and download the software and install it. When you open the software, you'll just head up to the File menu, which is not pictured here, but it's around where my mouse is. And you open up your GIF file, and then you go back to the File menu, you choose Export. When that happens, you're going to get this Export to Image dialog box. You type in a file name, hit Export. And then this is the part that's kind of interesting, this Export Image as GIF. You have some options here. So here are the two things that you need to do. First of all, you need to tell it that, yes, I still want it as an animation. So you make sure that that's checked. And the second thing is you want to uncheck the loop forever thing. After that, you can export it. And as you can see, it worked. So that is that. One last thing I'd like to show you now that you see how to insert these things is let's take a look at a few examples. So let me just pop down to that last slide, grab this URL. I'm actually going to paste this into the chat window if you want to save this for later, because I think it's got some really neat, I think it's got some cool examples. So put that in, send, but let's go take a look at it right now ourselves. So here we are at the Lottie files blog, and they just show you some cool places where people have used Lottie files. So for example, Twitter, which I guess is now called X, years ago have implemented this, I'm sure, which lets you, when you click on the heart logo, to have it do a little animation, and then you can watch the thing count up, and that was done using a Lottie file. Some of the Lottie files, actually a lot of them, are interactive ones, which make me think that's kind of cool and probably worth exploring. Some are pretty simple, like this one here, which is like a little shopping cart, which just jiggles to let you know where you're supposed to add the button. This one was cool. We were trying to do a submission, and it makes the interface shape too. And then this one, which is just really subtle, but I think it's really cool. This is the one for Netflix, which is just showing off the feature that you can download your show. And it does it by just having this little tiny subtle icon, which adds just a little bit of motion in a repeating way, which I don't think is particularly distracting. So that is what I wanted to cover today. Let's pop back into PowerPoint here. And do we have any questions today? Can you show us how to add the GIF into a component? Yes, of course, I'd be happy to do that. Let's pop over into my remote desktop machine. And we're going to go into my web projects control panel, and my Animate example is my web component. All right. So first of all, I added my file by right-clicking here, and I said add. And then because I couldn't, because it filters it based on what pane you have selected here, I need to choose all files so I could see everything. I grabbed the animation that I downloaded, so now it's added to the project. And then, of course, I made sure, show me all files, please. And I made sure that my file was set so that it could be, read in page security. That's always a don't forget. Now let's see what I took to add it into my project. To add it into my project, all I did was, here's my panel card. I went into, it was a static element, so it goes into other controls. Oops. And images is the first one that you're going to choose. Keep in mind, if I couldn't find it, I could also click add control, and that will bring up a find button. But I'm going to add image. I'm going to tell it I want it. Yeah, right there is fine. Double click on the image so that I can set the image. And now I have a select image button, and I'm going to choose an image in the web project. So select from web project folder, animation 2. There it is. Bang, bang. Now it appears on that page twice. That's nice. Submit. Oh, it does. Oh, look, it's in sync. I love it. Okay, let's see. Any other questions that we have here? Okay, okay, here's a sort of involved one, but let me just take a quick read through it. So the question is using access as data source, and it was very slow to load in a list control. Blah, 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 is access not access? Okay, so if the general question is access is fine, but it is not going to be a very fast database, especially as it gets larger. And you know, that depends on how many tables and stuff that you have linked. You'd probably be much better off using is upsizing your database to a SQL Server type of database. And there is an upsized Genie, SQL Server or MariaDB or one of those other ones, that one of the other sort of proper SQL databases. An Access database puts everything into one file, but it's really not optimized for high volume and quick load times. So I wouldn't recommend it. There is an database upsized Genie. I think that should be listed in help. Let me just see if I can find it. Or you know what? Never mind. If you go to documentation, look for a database upsize. It'll show you how you can take that database and convert it into the database that's more robust. And again, if you have questions, send it to guides@alphasoftware.com. Thanks. Okay, this is a Salesforce integration question that we've got here, but if you could also send that over to guides@alphasoftware.com, that would be helpful. It's a question I don't know the answer to, having to do with logging in and tokens. Otherwise, that looks like it. Well, hey, everyone, thanks so much for showing up today. Really appreciate having you all here. We look forward to seeing you at our next Wednesday webinar. Until then, take care and stay well. Bye-bye.